It was a typical day for the adventurers as they made their way through the icy terrain of Northrend, each step taking them closer to the next adventure. They had heard rumors of an ancient temple hidden deep within the frozen continent, a place that was said to be filled with treasures beyond their wildest dreams. Despite the dangers that lay ahead, the promise of glory and riches was too much to resist, and they set out on their journey to find the temple. It took them several days of travel to finally reach their destination, a desolate expanse of frozen tundra that seemed to stretch on forever. The winds were harsh and unrelenting, tearing at their clothes and freezing the tips of their noses, but they pressed on, their eyes fixed on the distant silhouette of the temple. As they drew closer, the temple loomed larger and larger, its ancient stone walls rising up from the ice like a monument to a forgotten age. They could see now that the temple was massive, easily the size of a small town, and they wondered what kind of treasures it might hold. The entrance to the temple was a narrow tunnel carved into the side of a cliff, its walls coated in a thin layer of frost. The adventurers hesitated for a moment, their hearts racing with excitement and fear, before plunging into the darkness. The tunnel was long and winding, its walls slick with ice, and they had to move slowly and carefully to avoid slipping and falling. As they neared the end of the tunnel, they saw a faint light glowing in the distance, and their spirits lifted at the thought of what lay ahead. When they finally emerged from the tunnel, they found themselves in a vast, open space that was lit by an eerie blue glow. The temple was enormous, with towering walls that stretched up into the darkness above. It was clear that this was no ordinary temple. There was an almost palpable sense of ancient magic in the air, a feeling that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. They made their way deeper into the temple, passing through vast halls and corridors that were adorned with intricate carvings and glowing runes. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the sound of distant chanting, and they could feel the power of the temple growing stronger with each step. As they approached the heart of the temple, they saw that it was home to a massive statue of an unknown god, its eyes glowing with a faint blue light. At the base of the statue lay a small, ornate box, and it was clear that this was the artifact they had come to find. The adventurers approached the box cautiously, their hands shaking with anticipation. As they lifted the lid, a blinding light filled the room, and they were thrown back by a powerful blast of energy. When they finally came to, they found that time had frozen around them. The temple was frozen in time, with no movement or sound anywhere to be seen. They had unlocked the power of the artifact, but they had no idea how to reverse the effects. For what felt like hours, the adventurers tried everything they could think of to break the curse, but nothing worked. They were trapped in the frozen temple, with no hope of escape. As time passed, they began to notice strange things happening around them. Shadows moved of their own accord, whispers echoed through the halls, and they could feel a malevolent presence watching them from the shadows. They soon realized that the power of the artifact had awoken something dark and terrible, and they were not alone in the temple. The adventurers were forced to fight for their survival against the horrors that lurked within the temple. They battled against twisted monsters and malevolent spirits, their every step dogged by the feeling that something was watching them from the shadows. With no way to escape and no way to reverse the effects of the cursed artifact, they knew that their only hope was to find a way to destroy it. They searched every inch of the temple, combing through ancient tomes and deciphering cryptic runes in a desperate bid to find a way to destroy the artifact. The curse weighed heavy on them, and they struggled to keep their wits about them as they delved deeper into the temple's secrets. It was on the third day of their search that they found what they were looking for, a small chamber hidden deep within the temple, lined with strange, glowing crystals. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and atop the pedestal was a small, glittering object that they knew must be the key to destroying the cursed artifact. With a sense of mounting dread, they approached the pedestal and lifted the object from its resting place. As soon as they did, the chamber began to shake, and they heard the sound of stone grinding against stone as the temple shifted around them. They knew they had only moments to act, and they raced back to the heart of the temple, dodging twisted monsters and demonic spirits as they went. They reached the statue just as the temple began to crumble around them, and with a cry of desperation, they destroyed the cursed artifact. In an instant, time began to flow once more, and the frozen temple was transformed into a chaotic maelstrom of destruction. The adventurers fought their way through the collapsing halls, dodging falling debris and dodging blasts of arcane energy. When they finally emerged from the temple, battered and bruised but alive, they saw that the sky had turned dark, and the land around them was racked with terrible storms. They knew that they had unleashed something terrible, something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. As they made their way back to civilization, they knew that they had stumbled upon something beyond their understanding, something that should never have been disturbed. And as they looked back at the ruined temple, they knew that they had paid a terrible price for their curiosity. The whispers started almost immediately after the group descended into the labyrinth. They were faint at first, just a soft rustling in the darkness, but as they pressed deeper into the maze, the whispers grew louder and more distinct. At first, the adventurers thought it was just their imagination playing tricks on them, or perhaps the sound of the wind blowing through the cavernous tunnels. But as the whispers grew more frequent and more unsettling, they began to realize that something was very wrong. The labyrinth was like nothing they had ever seen before. The walls were slick with moisture, and strange, twisting vines snaked their way along the floor and ceiling. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the faint odor of sulfur, and every step they took seemed to bring them deeper into the labyrinth's twisted embrace. As they stumbled along, searching for a way out, the whispers grew louder and more insistent. At first, they were just a jumbled mess of voices, too indistinct to understand. But as the group pressed on, they began to pick out individual words and phrases. Some of the whispers were in languages they didn't recognize, while others were in languages they knew all too well. They heard voices speaking in hushed tones about unspeakable horrors and twisted perversions, and they heard the tortured cries of the damned echoing through the labyrinth's dark halls. Despite the growing sense of unease, the group pressed on, driven by the hope that they would eventually find a way out of the labyrinth. But as the whispers grew louder, they began to realize that they were not alone in the maze. Malevolent spirits and demonic entities lurked in the shadows, watching their every move and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The group could feel their presence, a cold and palpable weight in the darkness, and they knew that they were in grave danger. The labyrinth twisted and turned, leading them deeper into its twisted heart. The whispers grew louder and more frenzied, driving the group to the brink of madness. They saw strange visions in the darkness, flashes of twisted nightmares that seemed to be just beyond their grasp. As their sanity began to unravel, the group realized that they might never find their way out of the labyrinth alive. They were trapped, lost in a twisted maze of darkness and despair, surrounded by malevolent spirits and demonic entities that hungered for their souls. But even in the face of such overwhelming horror, the group refused to give up. They fought on, driven by the hope that they might one day find a way out of the labyrinth and back into the light. In the end, it was a combination of luck and sheer determination that saw them through. They stumbled upon a hidden passage, a narrow tunnel that led them out of the labyrinth and into the cold light of day. As they emerged from the darkness, battered and bruised but alive, they knew that they had faced something truly terrible, something beyond their wildest nightmares. The whispers in the dark still haunted them, echoing in their minds long after they had left the labyrinth behind. But even as they struggled to come to terms with the horror they had faced, they knew that they had been changed forever. They had seen things that no mortal was ever meant to see, and they knew that they would carry the memory of those whispers in the dark with them for the rest of their lives. Despite the relief of finally escaping the labyrinth, the group was haunted by the experience. They were shaken to their core and struggled to come to terms with what they had witnessed. For weeks after the incident, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, convinced that they could hear the whispers again. Some of them turned to drinking and drugs to numb the memories, while others tried to forget by throwing themselves into their work. But no matter how hard they tried, the memory of the labyrinth and the whispers in the dark remained with them. Eventually, the group began to fall apart. They stopped communicating with each other and went their separate ways, each struggling to come to terms with what they had experienced. Years passed, and the group members grew old and gray. But the memory of the labyrinth and the whispers in the dark never faded. It remained a haunting presence in their lives, a constant reminder of the terror they had faced. Then, one day, a new member joined their group. He was a young man, eager and full of energy, with a hunger for adventure that reminded the group of their younger selves. The group was hesitant at first, reluctant to expose someone to the horrors they had faced. But the young man was persistent, and eventually they relented, agreeing to take him on a journey that would test his mettle and perhaps even help them heal their own wounds. As they journeyed through dark and twisted landscapes, the whispers returned. But this time, the group was different. They were no longer the frightened adventurers who had stumbled through the labyrinth all those years ago. Instead, they were seasoned warriors, battle-hardened by the horrors they had faced. They knew how to fight back against the whispers, how to resist the temptation to give in to madness. And so, when the young adventurer faltered, they were there to support him, to guide him through the darkness and help him find his way out. In the end, they emerged from the journey stronger and more resilient than ever before. They had faced the whispers in the dark and emerged victorious, with a renewed sense of purpose and a deep appreciation for the power of friendship and courage. As they parted ways once more, the group members knew that the memory of the labyrinth and the whispers in the dark would always be with them. But this time, they were ready to face it, to fight back against the darkness and emerge triumphant.